Hey, Rylan here at the Vic Shop. Today I want to talk about rebuilding the clutch in your Victory. Something to know about the Victory clutches is that they are really small in comparison to the entire bike. Victory made their clutch design to start in the 2002 model year, and then the clutch remained relatively unchanged from '02 all the way up to 17. And it was small, and it was fine back in '02, '03, you know, when the bikes were cruisers. They didn't have big bags and fairings and the like on them. But then they got into building stuff like cross bikes and Visions, and then people would do things like put huge luggage racks on them and trunks and fill them full of stuff and put a hitch on the back, and then the tiny clutch that's in here really struggles to hold it all back. And then we have clutch issues. And then the other common known issue with these clutches is that because they're kind of right on the edge of what they can handle, the wrong oil, they're a wet clutch, so using the wrong oil will cause issue as well. The most common thing is that a person uses a full synthetic oil and it's just too slick and the bike is able to overcome it. And so the first rule of thumb when you're owning a Victory is to use the right oil. I recommend a semi-synthetic oil, not a full synthetic, and that it be MA rated, which is a air-cooled wet clutch motorcycle engine, rather than like an automotive style oil or a diesel engine oil. There are several oils on the market that meet that spec. All the OEM oils will meet that spec, so like Yamalube and Suzuki oil, and even Victory's got their own, and Indian has their own semi-synthetic MA oil, and that's what I use. I use the Victory oil. That way there's no issues. You know, no one can say, "Oh, you used the wrong oil." I'm using the Victory oil. So when your clutch does slip, the next most important thing to know is, beyond that, you know, it's not just you, and if you're using the correct oil, is the type of clutch replacement that you put in there is also important. Victory still makes an OEM clutch here. The fibers and plates, that's the part number. I don't know how long they'll continue to manufacture this for. Hopefully a long time, because they're probably selling tons of these. But this is super expensive. This box right here, well, you can see that's the price. 650 bucks, as opposed to the aftermarket equivalent. Well, I wouldn't call it equivalent. The aftermarket thing that exists, which is under $250. And so when you attempt to use the aftermarket one, know that we have a ton of problems with these, and it's certainly not guaranteed to work. It's actually 50-50 gamble maybe at the most. And so how you would figure cost is you go, holy crap, $650, I'm gonna buy this one. And then you put this one in, you pay some guy a few $100 to put it in, or you take a Saturday afternoon and put it in, and then of course it lasts 100 miles and then it starts slipping again. You go, oh, what the heck? And then you end up buying the correct one. So then your total cost is both of these kits. Or you could say, I'm not much of a gambler, and I would just prefer to get the correct kit right off the bat, and then this is what I recommend. When you get it, it's going to have all the fibers and plates and everything in here. Actually, let's just crack this one open. I'll show you. I got this one soaking, which is part of the process. Let's crack this open here. So, packing out here. The interesting thing is there's going to be an extra part in here because, like I said, they started making these in '02. And the '02 clutch, the 2002 model year clutch, didn't use this the judder. It didn't use a judder, and then they changed that in '03. And from '03 to 17, the clutches are identical. So they've got two of these top plates in here that are a little bit different than the actual fibers. Down here you can kind of see the shape of the wear material is bigger. So one of these two you'll take out and throw away, or send it to me, or set it on your bench because you're not going to need it. And so then you'll take all the fibers and you put them in here. This is just Victory oil. I got an old cookie tin that I let them soak in. Really, it needs to soak for 15 minutes, or the more the merrier. Can't hurt to soak it overnight, but it does need to soak a little bit before you put it all together. And then it'll have all the plates here too. And something that I like to do with the plates is, if you notice when you unpack it, inside this packing bag is a kind of a powder. It's like something to keep the moisture away, and keep these, because this is bare metal, keep them from rusting. And so I don't just throw these in like that, because they're kind of coated with an anti-rust slippery, and you can feel them, they're slick. It's like baby powder kind of. And I'll actually take these over to the parts washer and just give them a bath of parts cleaner, and then I'll just wipe it really quick with an abrasive pad. That's the word I'm looking for. I mean, I'm not like sanding them down or anything. I'm just taking the shipping coating off of it with just a quick wipe of the abrasive pad with some cleaner there. So we got the bike on the bench, got the right clutch kit. We're gonna clean those up, let those soak. The next step be drain the oil, of course, and then I'm going to open up the primary. Oh, and before I start, the special tool you're gonna need on this job is a clutch compressor tool, which I'll show you later on in the video. But before you begin, you're going to need this clutch tool. And Barnett does make and sell a clutch tool. I think I got it down here. Yeah, and this works fine. And if you are a member of my website, I can loan you this for free, or the cost of shipping anyway. But there's the Barnett one, and it works fine. Nothing wrong with that. And so then we will begin taking this apart. So I'm gonna just film this in fast motion, but what you're gonna see is I'll take pliers and undo the clutch cable. I'll move this back by hand, take the cable out. I'm gonna remove this chin piece here, and remember that it's got a little nut on the back that holds this oil cooler on there. And then that'll allow me to unplug the electrical wire, the charging wire that comes out of here, because it is plugged in way down here. And so it's just way easier if this chin is out of the way. And then we're going to take the floorboard off. And then once that electrical wire is unplugged, then we can... And yeah, I forgot there's so something to note on this guy's bike is the shifter mechanism here. He's got it clocked way far forward. I would say that's 7 o'clock or something like that. And you can see there's a couple of dots here. There's a dot in this piece, dot in that piece. They're supposed to be aligned, and this one's not. And it can affect the way that the bike shifts. And so what I might do when I put this back together is give this guy a longer shift rod. So what's happened is it probably came from the factory. The shift rod, or lever there was probably set in the middle or the rear, and then he's moved it to the front because it's adjustable. But what they don't tell you is that you need a longer rod, and so then what he's done is just move that thing forward. But it messes with the geometry, and really that should be clocked backwards and a longer rod be used. But I digress. So I'm going to take that off, and then the primary off, and then we can still tell you how to get that clutch out of there. Alright, so as you can see in that fast forward video, I took the chain off, I took the shifter and the floorboard off, and Sometimes the cover just pops right off, and other times it's glued on there pretty good. Well, not glued, but figuratively glued on there pretty good. And this one's the latter, where it's kind of a pain to get off. So typically what I'll do is, take the cable off, and then I'll just rotate this down by hand, and it kind of forces this part of the primary away from the engine case. But there's a dowel on this side, and sometimes I'll get hung up on the dowel. It's a real tight fit, and this one's no different. So down here there's kind of a tab that I like to pry off of, where I'm not going to damage any sort of sealing surface or a visible part of the block, and just try to work it off of that little dowel there, while also kind of working this side. But man, it is jammed up real nice, to the point where I'm like looking the thing back over to make sure I didn't miss any bolts. So I really don't like to pry on the sealing surface, but this one's got me doing it. It's jammed up real nice on that dowel. There we go. It popped loose. Sometimes that dowel will get rust on it, and it's kind of jams it up like that. So we pulled that off. Again, don't forget to unplug that in advance. And it's not uncommon for the shifter pawl to come with the primary. No big deal. I'll just pull it out of there, and then I'll just stick it back in there for safekeeping. Let me show you that real quick. I'm gonna go set the cover on the bench. Okay. So when you put that pawl in there, you want to, that spring needs to go over that thing, the round part. And then the other part of the spring splits that dowel there. So I'm gonna make sure the dowel gets in between like so. Make sure that slips over like so. And that's how that fits in there. Do not put any sort of washer on here. Whatever you hear online, don't do it. Just leave that as is. Sometimes that shifter pawl will wear out. It's a $150 item, I think, and if you're so inclined, but that's not why we're here today. It's for this clutch. So this job could be done with the clutch in the engine like that. We could stick the tool on there and compress the spring and, pull it all apart. And this one probably is a good candidate for that, because sometimes when the clutch is all blown up, it'll discolor the basket and it'll be all black and there'll be crap everywhere, slung out. But this one looks pretty good, and there's sometimes a possibility where a person can just leave the basket on there and pull the plates out. They've just barely been slipping. And if you didn't want to buy a new clutch kit, you could potentially try to clean them up. And that's what I've got. Excuse me. Over here is I've got a set that I just put it through a mineral bath and scrubbed off all of the additives that the wrong oil had ingrained into the fibers, and then I put the plates on on my machinist granite over here. Actually, I made this thing. I'll show you how this works here. I'm gonna grab some clutch plates. So if you're looking to gamble and you got a machinist, I've got an old clutch hub, and I just fits over a clutch plate, and then I got this machinist edge here, and just kind of and clean them up and make sure they're not warped or anything, and kind of put a nice crosshatch into it, and then send these through the parts washer if they're not all blackened, and because it is common for a person to use the wrong oil. The bike's got 5,000 miles on it, and he's doing the first oil change, and he goes to something full synthetic, and it immediately starts slipping, and he catches it in time. It's possible to save those clutch fibers, and But it's kind of a rarity. It's happened, but I would certainly plan on buying the correct stuff here. So now that we got this all apart, let me reposition the camera and I'll show you. Well, actually, you know what? Let's keep going. I'll show you what's next here. Let's get the hog ring pliers out. Pop this sucker off. Oh, you know what? I'm going to have to put that on the stand. All right. So the special tool works by engaging the clutch and pushing on this diaphragm spring so you can take this inner clip out. But we'll show you that on the bench. Anything made after, let's see, when did they start using that? Probably 11. So if you got a pre-2010, it won't have a stake nut. It'll have a nut that's Loctited, and then there's a like a lock washer behind it. And then in 11, they started using this stake nut, which is 32mm nut that we're going to zap off there. And the nut, if you got a stake nut, if you're in 2011 and later, then do buy a new nut. That's a cheap insurance to buy that specialty nut. It could be reused if you're really in a pinch, but my recommendation is to replace it. And we'll get the big gun out for this. Get the 1/2 inch going. And then I've actually had people ask me how much effort it should take to get this out, and it should be like sliding on a pair of shoes. I grab it, put my thumbs in the middle, and pull it off the shaft like so. And we'll dive into later why there's a little bit of tension on that. But let's bring this to the bench. All right, here we are back at the bench. So, grab your coffee. And the hog ring pliers. Oh, let's get these washers out of here. So it's got a couple of washers behind that stake nut. And this one does have a convex concave side to it. And so you want to note the orientation of that. And the thick one behind it. And then my style of clutch tool is kind of like the OEM one. It's just something I made back when I was at the dealership. I just made a copy of what the dealer was using, and this style clips in like so. This center rod is mimicking the pinion that would be in the bike, and then we're going to compress it down. Let me grab a needle nose pliers here. But both tools are just compressing the spring. And then there is a little inner kind of washer. I want to make sure it's out of the way so we can get the clip out. Like so. Once that clip's undone, take the tension off the spring. Making sure nothing gets caught up in the act. Like that. Let's take it apart. There's the backer to the clip and the clip itself. Set those there. I can just leave this all together. And then I got a nice solid workbench here, and I like to just let it kind of drop a little to hopefully get the whole clutch back out at the same time, which usually results in that, which is a majority of the clutch back. It's just got the judder left here at the bottom. Let me get a little magnet for that. And if you were doing this on the engine, these magnets, a couple of little magnets are helpful to get down in there and pull the stuff out. Oh yeah, it has been slipping. So I can just tell because there'll be a bunch of crap up in the inside of the inner hub here. It's really kind of hard to see. Well, let me take the inner hub out. So this is the benefit of removing the entire hub from the engine. Is you can, this would have been a pain. This would have been impossible to clean out inside the engine, all this crap in here. And then we want to assess the bearing that's back here. This bearing feels good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pound out the inner hub. I'm going to pound out that bearing, set the bearing aside because it's good, and then we'll take the outer hub to the parts washer and clean all this crap out of the outer hub, excuse me. So I'm gonna go flip the ring pliers around. Take this external ring off of here. This one's kind of a bear sometimes. Today is gonna be no different. Come on, baby. Come on. There it goes. Sometimes the soft mallet's all it takes just to pop this out of here. Catch it with my hand. Yeah, that was easy. It's just kind of a slip fit there. And then you want to, this bike's pretty low miles, but you definitely want to check this hub out and make sure that it's not ruined here in the grooves. And then that the judder is in good shape. There's kind of a step here, and if it's been slipping badly, the step may be worn off or just destroyed, and then you're just going to want a new inner hub in that case. And here we can see what I'm talking about with the grime and stuff that's inside. It's all like clutch material and rust and crap that we need to clean out of there. So then, another ring, another snap ring here to get this bearing out. The reason I'm taking the bearing out, even though it's good, is that I don't want it to get messed up when I start parts washing this. I don't want it to dry out and get debris in it from the parts washer. So we're just going to remove it from the mix. Same thing, I'm just going to use the rubber mallet or the plastic mallet to gently tap that out of there, set it to the side, make sure it's in good shape. Now let's take this over to the parts washer. Alright, here we are back at the workbench after cleaning this whole thing up. This is a low mileage bike, and what happened to this clutch, it looks to me like it's a rust issue. which is super common on a bike that's been stored in a location that can get moisture, such as an unheated garage in an area of the world that gets snow and cold. There'll be condensation, and if you don't ride the bike, the metal parts inside your engine get rusted, and the clutch is no different. Let's see if you can see. Oh yeah, a little bit. But those are rust spots where just the clutch is stuck together and rusted. And then when the guy started the bike again and started moving it, all the rust kind of broke free and got all up inside the hub and made it slip. And so sometimes, you know, these are savable, but I wouldn't in this case because there's just so much debris that's kind of embedded into these fibers that we're definitely going to go for the full replacement. I am taking the judder spring and its base off of this stack. The rest of this is going to come in the Victory pack. It's got the specialty one for the top and then the judder on the bottom. So we can toss these in the trash and get started back on this hub. So if this was a high mileage bike, sometimes the clutch plates will wear grooves in the outer hub and in the inner, and that's why I wanted to check that inner hub too. But after you get it cleaned up, it's a good time to assess that. And if I say to myself, man, that thing's got a ton of grooves in there and they're deep, and that's going to affect the engagement of the clutch. And I'll get a little Dremel tool like so. It's got a small round piece of sandpaper on the end, and I'll just quick zip through here and take all the ridges off and sharp edges and stuff. I don't want to take a bunch of material, and just a quick zip in and out usually is enough to clear that up and then kind of smooth out the engagement of the clutch. But this one was in good shape, no worries. We're gonna not take that step, and we'll start putting it back together. So the clutch pieces have been soaking over here, or the fibers that is. I've taken the opportunity to clean all of the packing lubricant off of the plates, the metal plates. And then we'll start by putting this bearing back in. I'm just going to give it a little bit of engine oil. Spin it around, get it nice and coated in some fresh engine oil. This bearing's still available from Victory if you see that it's bad. Ooh, man, that was nice. I should buy a lotto ticket today. Sometimes you got to tap those in with the rubber mallet, or you could get out your bearing and seal driver kit and find an appropriately sized spacer or driver in there. That one slipped right in though. Don't forget the clip. Beautiful. Make sure it's fully engaged. And then we can put the inner hub in there. And I just use my soft mallet just to tap it down in there. I got it sideways so it's bridging the castle on this. You could alternatively, stick something in there and drive that. But it's kind of a slip fit to a certain extent, and shouldn't take much effort. There we go. Bunch of clips in this job. Good set of clip pliers is nice. Goes on a lot easier than it comes off. And then we can start really putting it back together. Let's see, it does come with instructions. I haven't looked at these in years. Oh yeah. Yeah, you might want to pay attention to the instructions here, because it talks about how the judder goes in, because this can definitely be upside down, and then the order of all the plates and everything. So that's nice that they put that in there. Of course, I just know it by heart. You start with the bottom plate, and underneath the judder, And then the judder itself is a concave type of spring, and it goes, the inner part is facing down into the clutch. And then we start off with the judder fiber, which is that small one. And so I just am wiping off any excess oil. So these have a sharp edge and a soft edge. I think it has something to do with when they're, maybe a machine presses these out of a sheet or something like that. And kind of hard to describe on a video, but when you hold these in your hands, you'll be able to feel this this edge. This is described in the tech manual too, which you can download for free on my site. But you'll see that one edge is clearly sharper than the other, which is rounded. So on the fibers, which is kind of a soft material, you want the soft edge up. That's kind of how I remember it in my head. And then for the steels, since they're a hard material, we want the sharp edge up. And sometimes, you know, I'm wearing gloves and I'll just take the excess oil and just kind of wipe it over the metal pieces. So there we got the first piece. Now we can work our way into the regular part of the clutch pack. Wiping off the oil, determining which side is which, soft up. Wiping the excess oil on this, we have sharp up. And so on and so forth. Okay, and then we find ourselves at the last plate, which, if you remember, has a little bit bigger fiber pads on it and has a twin that you will likely not need unless you had a 2002. Again, making sure the soft part is up. Then we could put the spring and the pressure plate back on there. Let's slide that the bottom of the clip holder and the clip. We shall put the compressor tool back on there. Make sure it's centered. Press it down. And we'll put the inner piece down in there. And then the clip on top. And so, something that gets a lot of people, it looks weird when it's assembled correctly. Let me get the tool out of there. So, let's see how well it'll focus up on this, but it's kind of got this like gap between the spring and the clip, and that's normal. It's supposed to look like that. Let me take the camera off its thing here. And yeah, so totally normal. That's the way it goes. Now we can take it over to the bike. Okay, here we are back at the bike with our completed clutch assembly. And what's to note on this is the split gear, and this is what keeps tension between the two meshing gears. And what I do is take a screwdriver, wedge it between, and twist so that it lines the split gear up and engages. So this is critical here because you don't want to slip it on the shaft and forget to engage that. If you were to torque it down at this point, it would mess up that gear, and that would be bad news. Grab a rag here. So set it on the shaft, slide it back, And I go from the top, I kind of keep it, actually I'm going to go from the side a little bit. Put my other hand on the hub, give it a little twist, and it pops right in there. And you will know it's seated properly. Well, it'll feel right, sound right, and these are going to fully engage the mesh between those two gears. So then we've got the big old flat washer that sits behind the convex concave washer, and the tall parts on the inner, and it faces out. Got the new nut, part number 7547477. They use this on the Indian bikes too, so I'll set that on there. No Loctite required. And then we get into locking the engine to torque this. The torque on it is 125, and if I just start torquing on it, it's going to spin everything over. Eventually. What is going on with this sucker here? Come on, baby. There we go. Alright. So the factory lock tool, this is a piece of Delrin here, and you slide it in and kind of the force goes up, and the block is holding it, and that's what I use. But you may not have this piece, probably don't. And then a lot of times what'll work is an old screwdriver handle. It's soft enough that it's not going to damage the gears, and you don't care about it. It's not shouldn't really flake off anything. And if it does, it's a little tiny piece of plastic, not a huge deal. So that's another way to hold it. Double check it with a double click. And that is that. Then we can stake the nut as is outlined in the tech manual. You stake the little outer parts. And not the inner. There's like 3 kind of open parts in the shaft, but you will have my free copy of the manual downloaded, and you will have versed yourself on it in advance. And we can put the throw-out bearing in there, and do check it just to make sure it's bearing is good. Let's put the clip back on. Make sure it's seated properly. There we go. Okay, so if this gasket had not ripped on me when I disassembled it, it would have been reusable. It's a paper with this bead of sealant or whatever you want to call it. But this one ripped in a couple spots, which is normal. It happens. And so we're going to very carefully scrape it all off there. The Victory's still making the stock gasket, and that's generally what I'll use unless it's like back ordered or something like that. And then there's another gasket on the market, the James gasket, and that one's fine. I've used that one before, nothing wrong with that. I just like to stick OEM if I can, and I'll just go through and scrape this off and pay a lot of attention that you're getting all the little
bits and pieces. It should be nice and clean and smooth, and you didn't forget any little pieces of, just the tiniest piece of gasket material that's left on the block is gonna leak. And here's your chance to do it right the first time, because what a pain is it gonna be when you find out it's leaking. You gotta take the dang cover back off again, oil's falling out. You gotta scrape this little tiny piece of gasket off of there that's like the size of a, I don't know, something tiny. Like I said, the tiniest imperfection will make it leak. So let me do this, and we'll talk a little about getting that cover on.